Trump's presidency is being felt the world over. A market in Delhi, 7,000 miles from DC, where new 50% tariffs have jewelry trader Shubham Jain seething.
Now people will start shifting to other places. They will order products from other places. Our jewelry sector and other sectors are very good in comparison. But after the 50% tax is imposed, the prices will increase and people will choose the cheaper options. We have been doing this work for a long time, and now there will be a lot of problems.
Some items are exempt, certain pharmaceuticals and fuel products, and tech like mobile phones. But the bulk of India's $90 billion exports market to the US is now hit with additional import taxes. Business owners like this shoe manufacturer hope they can find buyers elsewhere. The outcome, though, might not be what President Trump had intended.
We are looking at the Russian market also again. We are looking at the CIS countries also again. We have the ASEAN countries also. We have the South America also. It's a huge market. They have to understand nobody is going to surrender in any blackmailing. Nobody can going to surrender.
Talk of a pivot towards Russia is, of course, the irony. For Trump's tariffs are intended to persuade India to stop buying Russian oil, which the US says is financing Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The Russians use the money to build more arms and kill Ukrainians, and so American taxpayers have to provide more aid, military style, to the Ukrainians. So that's insane.
The president has applied aggressive economic leverage, for example, the secondary tariffs on India, to try to make it harder for the Russians to get rich from their oil economy. He's tried to make it clear that Russia can be re-invited into the world economy if they stop the killing, but they're going to continue to be isolated if they don't stop the killing.
The Indians cry hypocrite, sending their foreign minister to Moscow last week and accusing the Americans and Europeans of continuing their own business with Russia when it suits them. For example, natural gas.
Today's meeting gives us an occasion to discuss our political relationship as well, but also to review our bilateral ties. So I look forward to an exchange of views on politics, on trade, on economic, investment, defense, science and technology, and of course people-to-people exchanges.
We have good results in cooperation in the sphere of hydrocarbons and the supply of Russian oil to the Indian market, and we have mutual interest in implementing joint projects for the extraction of energy resources, including in the Russian Federation, in the Far East, and on the Arctic shelf.
So Russia appears poised to step in as the US moves away. This effigy of Trump paraded along India's streets just a few days ago. And the country's strongman leader, Narendra Modi, with regional elections looming in a couple months, tries to reassure voters that everything will be all right.
My country's small-scale businessmen, farmers, animal keepers, I keep on promising to everyone again and again that for Modi, your well-being is paramount.
When Modi met Trump earlier this year, the US president lavished praise on him. A very smart man and a good friend, he said. And a note left in the White House yesterday by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent appeared to suggest the White House wouldn't retaliate if Delhi reacted badly to the tariff hike.
European Union, very friendly.
As recent estimates suggest, Trump's tearing up of international trade agreements could earn the US $500 billion. But with Indian exporters bracing for sharp declines, Washington may well rue the law of unintended consequences. For next week, China will host the leaders of both India and Russia at a BRICS security meeting. And increasing US protectionism may well be seen as an imperative for the global South and Russia to work together much more closely. Well, joining us to discuss what might happen next is Manoj Keval-Aramani, who's an analyst at the Takshashila Institution, which is a geopolitics, technology and public policy think tank based in Karnataka, India. Thanks for joining us, sir. How do you think these new 50% tariffs are going to affect India, Indian business, Indian export?
Look, I think that there's no two ways around it. There's going to be an impact on small businesses in India. There's going to be an impact on a select set of sectors which these tariffs hit the worst, particularly textiles, apparels. Some of them hit auto, gems, and jewelry. And some of these sectors are labor intensive, so there are likely to be job losses. And I think we're already seeing that in the reporting that's coming out from different places in India, that the anticipation is that the order book's going to be lean and you're going to see some sort of job losses. Just to give you a broad overview, the tariffs hit about 50 to 55% of Indian exports to the United States. And the assessment is that they would shave off anywhere between 0.5% to a little bit more than that of GDP growth. But then that's if they last for the year.
Are people angry? And if they are they angry at Trump? Are they angry at Modi?
There is a general sense of dismay with US policy. I think the anticipation in India was that the US and India have shared interests, and both the governments are talking. India was one of the early countries in with Trump 2.0.
Trump called Modi a good man and a good friend.
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain bit of learning from there in terms of how much investment one can do in personal diplomacy with somebody who is so mercurial.
The key is what happens next. We've got this BRICS meeting in Shanghai next week, where not just India and China get the chance to sit down together, but Russia as well, which is, of course, what the US administration, what the Trump White House do not really want to see. They don't want to see Russia and Russian business interests gaining out of this. What do you think is going to happen?
Look, this is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. It's a group which is essentially focused on security in Central Asia. So I think that's predominantly what the agenda of the grouping is. I don't see Russia being a particular export destination. Russia is not a demand sink from an Indian perspective. I think that there are opportunities to sell in China, but those require structural dialogue between China and India to remove non-tariff barriers that China has placed on Indian products.
Is that likely?
Indian export. Well, it's a dialogue process that's just resumed over the last year. We are seeing both sides giving positive indications that they want to talk about this. So we'll wait and see what happens. But I'm not terribly optimistic because my sense is that if you look at the data over the past year, just in 2025, Indian exports to China have fallen by 15%, while Indian imports from China have continued to rise. This trade deficit has been a long-standing concern for India. My sense is that if Beijing wants a normalized relationship with India, it will try and address these in some way or the other, particularly around non-tariff barriers.
And the big picture with Russia, obviously we saw the red carpet treatment in Anchorage, and on the one hand, the Trump administration is punishing India for buying Russian oil and natural gas, but on the other hand, there is this risk that actually Russia is pushed more firmly into the orbit of India and China as America recedes.
That's where I think the United States and India have a shared interest. They don't want to see Russia being pushed into the Chinese orbit. And my view is that American policies are making it much more easy for Russia to be leaning on China much more. Look, as far as this argument that the US wants to punish India for its dealings with Russia, for its purchase of oil with Russia, America continues to purchase materials from Russia. The US businesses, particularly energy.
You think the US are being hypocritical?
Yes, indeed, they are. And it's evidently so. As part of this meeting in Anchorage, reporting tells us that US businesses, particularly energy companies, are looking at the Russian market, are looking to get back in the Russian market. The US is talking about potentially buying icebreakers from Russia. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think there's a shared interest there. I think United States and India would both be well served if Russia were a friend of both of those countries. And I think if that's the agenda, then fair enough, but this is being gone about in a way which is counterintuitive.
So they'd be well served economically, but not so much ideologically.
I think they'd be well served strategically. If Russia was working well with the US and India, it would mean that Russian dependence on China would reduce. It would mean that China, which is America's pacing challenge, would be isolated much more than it finds itself today. And therefore, if that's the objective, if the grand strategy is to deal with China, which is America's facing challenge, then this is not the way to go about it.
Final words, do you think the 50% tariffs on India will last?
I hope that better sense prevails. I hope that both governments can find a way to work around what their immediate concerns are. And I'm quite optimistic that sooner or later we will see, once inflation hits the US also, once American consumers pay more, once the Indian side realizes how it can figure out diversifying its exports, sooner or later both sides will be able to work around a solution.
Manoj Kavalarmani, talking to us from Karnataka in India. Thank you very much indeed for your insights.
Thank you.